The red sold sign was driven deep into the earth at the gate, a wound on a 400-acre legacy. Frank Colton's dusty pickup rolled to a stop. He had just driven back from Houston, still sore from surgery.
That sign wasn't there when I left.
He climbed the porch steps with a heaviness that had nothing to do with his recovery. On the kitchen counter lay a real estate closing notice and a manila envelope, a cold coffee mug beside them. His calloused hand lifted the notice, the paper crisp and foreign in this kitchen. The signature on the line was hesitant, the ink slightly uneven, an imitation of his name.
That's not my hand. Someone forged it.
He didn't call anyone. He set the notice on the passenger seat and turned the ignition. His knuckles went white on the steering wheel as he pulled out, heading somewhere he hadn't been in 40 years. The pickup crunched onto the gravel lot of Colton's Auto, a shop that looked as tired as the man who'd built it 40 years ago. Inside, a figure in a leather vest straightened, a dirty rag frozen in his grip as he recognized the silhouette in the doorway. Frank stepped into the bay. Grease and metal shavings crunched under his boots. The two men locked eyes like a snapped chain.
Same stubborn jaw, same hard-lined mouth. The farm, Ray. Karen sold it.
Raymond's hand uncurled from the wrench. It hit the bench with a dull clank that echoed through the silent shop.
He drove all this way for that.
She forged my signature on the closing papers. It's set for tomorrow.
And you came here. After 40 years.
Frank didn't answer. The weight of those 4 decades sat between them, heavier than any tractor engine Raymond had ever lifted, and just as likely to crush them both.
The closing's tomorrow, Ray. I need your help.
What kind of help do you expect from me after 40 years? You walked out and never looked back.
Raymond didn't wait for an answer. He crossed to the corner where an old steel safe sat, rusted but sturdy.
He kept it. After all this time, he kept the damn thing.
The safe door groaned open. From the dark, Raymond pulled a thick yellowed envelope, its edges curled by decades.
Our daddy split the deed. My name's on it, Frank. Been on it since '79. Karen never knew because you never told her.
He unfolded the original deed and the old will on the grease-stained workbench. The ink was faded, but the name was unmistakable. Raymond Colton, legal owner of record.
Then that sale isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
We stop it at the closing tomorrow. But after, Frank, we're going to talk about what you did.
Frank gave a single nod. The old anger was still there, but the farm was bigger than either of them. For the first time in 4 decades, the brothers Colton stood a chance of standing together. Raymond folded the deed with the care their father had taught, sliding it back into the yellowed envelope.
You kept it all this time.
Someone had to. You buried me like a secret.
He locked the shop, the metal gate grinding down with a sound that ended the conversation. Frank got behind the wheel. Raymond settled in. The envelope placed on the worn vinyl seat, a frail armistice. The engine turned over, and they pulled onto the asphalt, the shop shrinking in the rear view. Raymond watched the fields blur, each mile pulling up memories he had buried decades ago.
She won't see it coming. Not until the deed lands on that table.
Frank's hands were steady on the wheel, but his eyes told a different story. The truck ate up the miles, the sun bleaching the dashboard, as 2 brothers drove toward a collision neither could avoid. At the Colton farmhouse, Karen sat at her vanity, tracing a signature that wasn't hers, her smile sharp as a file.
Frank always held that pen like a hammer. Easy to copy.
She capped the pen and reached for her phone, dialing Evan Hollis, the developer who thought he was buying 400 acres of prime land.
It's all set for 2 o'clock. The title company has everything ready.
And Frank? He's still in Houston?
He's in Houston. I signed for him. It's done.
She hung up and slid a half-empty wine glass aside, her eyes lingering on the closing notice she'd planted on the counter the day before.
By the time he finds the papers, the money will be overseas.
She grabbed her blazer, checked her reflection one last time, and walked out to her Lexus, the gravel crunching with finality. Miles away, Frank's pickup was closing in, but Karen only smelled victory as she drove toward the title office. Karen's Lexus pulled into the lot of Clear Title Services right at 2. The office was quiet, the deal prepped and waiting. Inside, Evan Hollis paced the conference room. Diane Kelly had the closing documents fanned across the polished table, every page marked with a yellow flag. Evan checked his watch again. For a man about to make a fortune, he looked like he couldn't sit still.
Everything's in order. Sign here, Mrs. Colton.
Karen's hand moved with casual ease, scratching Frank Colton's name onto the last page. The ink was identical to the forgery she'd practiced that morning.
They're done, Evan, your check.
Evan slid the cashier's check across the polished wood. The figure on it could buy half the county.
1.8 million, just like we agreed.
Funds verified. Let's seal it with a handshake.
Karen extended her hand, and Evan reached across the table. The deal was a breath away from sealing. The dusty pickup swung into the Clear Title Services lot, gravel popping under the tires. Frank parked right next to Karen's Lexus.
She's already inside. The pen's probably in her hand.
Frank killed the engine. Without a word, the brothers climbed out. Raymond clutched the envelope under his arm like a weapon.
40 years, and now we're here. You never thought it would end like this.
I didn't think about you at all, Ray. That was the problem.
They stopped at the glass doors. Frank straightened his cap, a gesture so familiar it could have been yesterday. The door came open with a whisper. Inside, the lobby was empty, but a muffled voice leaked from the conference room.
That's her laugh. She's celebrating right now.
Raymond touched the envelope. Frank's hand settled on the conference room doorknob, cold and smooth. They stood outside the door, two old men carrying the weight of a farm and a father's secret, ready to tear down a lie. The conference room door flew open, and the businesslike chatter evaporated. Karen's hand was still extended toward Evan when Frank Colton walked in, his cap held tight against his thigh. Behind him, Raymond filled the doorway, the yellowed envelope playing against his leather vest. Diane's pen stopped.
Take your hand back, Karen. That sale isn't happening.
Frank, you're supposed to be in Houston. This is a legal closing.
The cashier's check on the table might as well have been a dead leaf. Evan pulled his hand back like he'd touched a live wire.
You told me everything was signed and cleared. What kind of game is this?
The only game is the one she played. That signature is forged, and that land already has an owner.
He tilted his head toward Raymond, who stepped to the table's edge. The envelope landed with a soft thud that echoed like a verdict.
Who is this man, Mrs. Colton? You did not disclose another party.
This is Raymond Colton, my half-brother, and his name is on the original deed.
Raymond drew the deed from the envelope as if it were a fragile heirloom and placed it on the polished table, the paper crackling in the silence. Diane Kelly leaned forward, her reading glasses catching the light as she unfolded the document. The careful professionalism in her face gave way to something sharper.
The deed is dated 1979. The owner of record is Raymond Colton.
Evan Hollis rounded the table, peering over her shoulder, his mouth pressed into a hard line.
If that document is genuine, this entire transaction is void and I just lost a fortune.
Karen's hands gripped her chair arms. The smug smile she'd worn all day evaporated into a mask of desperation.
This is a fraud. Frank never had a brother. He's trying to cheat me out of my property.
I've handled deeds for 20 years. The notary seal and county stamp are consistent. It passes initial scrutiny.
Evan snatched the cashier's check off the table and tore it in half, the sharp rip slicing through the tension. He turned to Karen, voice venomous. The deal was dead, and all that remained was the blame.
You're nothing but a cheap con man. Frank hired some drifter to steal this land out from under me.
Raymond didn't flinch. He stood there with the same stubborn stillness as his brother.
Where's your proof? Produce a single document that says you're his brother or admit this is a fraud.
You want proof, ma'am? I've got a driver's license and a birth certificate right here in this envelope.
Karen's throat bobbed. For the first time, she really looked at Raymond's jawline and saw Frank's shadow.
Should I pull them out? Or would you rather call the sheriff and put your own signature under oath?
If he produces state-issued ID, I can verify it against the deed right now. It's that simple.
Raymond didn't wait. His grease-stained fingers pulled at the flap of the second envelope, the sound sharp in the silence. The room went quiet. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Frank watched Karen without a word, his stillness more terrible than any shout. Raymond laid a faded driver's license, a birth certificate, and a creased photograph on the table. They landed with the weight of a family tree. Diane took the photograph in both hands, holding it up like a piece of evidence. She looked from the photograph to Frank and Raymond, the decades melting into a single undeniable truth in her expression.
These documents are legitimate. Raymond Colton is exactly who he says he is.
This is a disaster. I'm not paying a cent for land I can't even buy.
Evan threw his pen across the table with a curse. It skittered into the wall and fell still. He snatched the torn check and shredded it, the pieces drifting down like confetti at a funeral.
You haven't heard the last of this, Karen. My lawyers will be in touch.
He stormed out, the door slamming so hard the window rattled. In the silence that followed, the photograph lay on the table like a verdict.
This entire transaction is null and void. I'm closing the file and notifying the title board.
She gathered her documents and slid them into the briefcase without another glance at Karen. Then Diane was gone, the door shutting softly, sealing Karen in with the brothers.
You think this changes anything? I'll drag this through every court in the state.
You forged my signature, Karen. There's no court that will side with a forger.
Raymond stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. Karen's mouth opened, but the words were ash. She had no more lies to spin. She dropped into the chair, hands limp, the polished table reflecting her defeated stare.
I'm not going to argue with you, Karen. The farm stays with the Coltons. That's final.
The three of them remained frozen, the old photograph on the table watching like a silent judge. Frank reached into his shirt pocket and placed a folded document on the table, the sheriff's department letterhead clearly visible.
I filed a fraud complaint this morning, Karen. The sheriff's office has everything they need.
You don't have the spine to put your own wife in handcuffs.
Her bravado cracked the moment she saw the notary's stamp. The fight drained from her voice.
The deputy is on the way. I told them right where you'd be, with a forged signature still warm on the paper.
Karen's hand flew to her mouth. She glanced at Raymond, who hadn't moved from the door.
I'll say I was forced, that you threatened me if I didn't forge it. It'll be your word against mine.
Frank didn't blink. His stillness filled the room like cold water rising.
Say whatever you want. The deed, the will, and those botched forgeries do all the talking.
Karen sagged, her threats reduced to empty air. All that was left was the sound of a clock ticking toward a knock on the door. Karen shoved her chair back so hard it screeched across the floor. Raymond didn't move from the door.
Move. This is false imprisonment. I'm leaving.
The deputy will be here soon. Sit down. You're not going anywhere.
She looked past Raymond to the door, then at Frank's unmoving face, and the last light of defiance died in her eyes. Karen sank back into the seat, her fingers clutching the armrests, her breathing hitched.
You had 40 years of marriage, Karen. All you had to do was not break the law.
She didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the photograph on the table, the two boys on the porch a lifetime away. A tear tracked through her foundation, but no words came. Raymond kept his post at the door, arms folded, the tattoo on his forearm visible, a gear and a date from the same era as the photograph. In the corridor outside, footsteps approached, heavy and deliberate. The three of them listened. A sheriff's deputy pushed the door open with a quiet authority. The badge on his chest caught the light. Mrs. Karen Colton, you are being served with a subpoena for presentation of forged documents. Karen's hand rose, shaking, and took the paper. The ink seemed to burn through her skin. The deputy waited, still as furniture, while her eyes tracked the legal language.
You heard the deputy. It's done.
Karen read the words, her mouth forming a silent denial. The paper trembled in her grip. Raymond remained at the door, his arms crossed, but his jaw had loosened.
I didn't want this. You chose it, Karen. Every step from the day you picked up that pen.
The subpoena slipped from her fingers and landed on the table, right next to the photograph. The deputy folded his hands, waiting. The only sound was Karen's ragged breathing. The deputy gestured. Karen rose unsteadily, her face hollow. She shuffled past the brothers, eyes down, the subpoena crumpled in her hand. At the door, she nearly brushed Raymond's vest. A heartbeat pause. Then she was gone. The deputy led her out. Her footsteps faded to nothing. The door closed with a soft click. The room let out a long breath. Only Frank and Raymond stood in the silence. Frank walked to the table and held the photograph. Two boys on a porch, forever young. He tucked it into his pocket, over his heart, and patted it once. Raymond gathered the deed and will, handling them like the relics they were. Their eyes met 40 years of silence one afternoon of justice. Without a single word, they turned and walked out, side by side, into the afternoon light. Brothers again. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for the two pickups, one dusty, one Lexus abandoned. The light had gone soft. Frank stopped at the truck and laid a hand flat on the warm hood. Raymond came up beside him, still carrying the envelope.
40 years, and today was the first time we ever stood on the same side of a fight.
For a moment, neither moved. Raymond's hand found Frank's shoulder and squeezed once, rough, quick, and understood. Frank pulled open the driver's door. The same worn seat, the same cracked dash. Nothing had changed, except everything.
I kept you buried all those years, Ray. That was wrong.
You were wrong, but you came to me when it counted. That counts.
The truck turned onto the county blacktop, the sun sinking ahead of them. Raymond leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Through the windshield, the familiar fences and pastures passed, each barn and gate a piece of a shared history they'd almost lost. They said nothing more, and nothing more needed to be said. The farm was waiting, and for the first time in decades, so were they. The pickup stopped at the gate. The red-soled sign still leaned there, a liar in the twilight. Frank cut the engine. The silence was deeper than sound, 400 acres holding their breath.
That sign was the first thing I saw when I came home. It won't be the last.
He walked to the sign, boots crunching, his hands closed around the post. With one hard yank, the sign tore free from the dirt, clods of soil scattering.
This ground remembers who belongs here.
He held it above his head for a moment, then hurled it onto the grass. It landed face down, the word hidden.
Looks better that way.
They stood at the gate, the pasture stretching out before them. Long shadows touched the barn, and the evening settled in. Frank unlatched the gate and swung it open. The farm was theirs, not by paper but by blood and a long overdue justice. They walked the pasture side by side, the barn a red silhouette against the last band of daylight. Neither man spoke. The wind moved through the grass, doing all the talking they didn't need to do. Raymond stopped at a stretch of fence, the old wood gray and splintering. He laid a hand on it, knuckles tender.
This fence line hasn't changed since I was 9.
Dad put those posts in the year you were born. Said you'd learn to mend them.
Raymond's grip tightened for a second, then released. He nodded at the barn. They circled back toward the house, the porch light flickering on as the sky deepened to purple. The screen door creaked as they climbed the porch steps, the sound older than either of them.
Kitchen lights still on. Coffee'll still be warm if you want it.
Raymond followed him inside without a word, the envelope still in his hand, and the door shut quiet behind them. In the farmhouse kitchen, Frank pulled 2 thick steaks from the icebox. Raymond stood at the sink, scrubbing engine grease from his hands under the cold tap, the water darkening. Frank handed him a knife and a yellow onion. Raymond took it with a wordless nod, the first time in decades they'd shared a kitchen without anger.
Pan's hot. Onions in first.
I know how to cook a steak, Frank. Didn't forget everything.
The skillet sizzled as the meat hit the cast iron. At the counter, Raymond's knife moved through the onion with the same exacting patience he used on a carburetor.
Garlic's in the jar if you want it. Karen never let me use enough.
Too much garlic was how Dad did it. Said it'd kill us, but he lived to 83.
They worked shoulder to shoulder, the old stove throwing warmth across the room. For a few minutes, those 40 years didn't exist. Frank set the plates on the worn wooden table: steak, potatoes, caramelized onions. Raymond filled 2 mismatched water glasses from a pitcher, no ice. They sat, lifted their glasses, and clinked. No toast, just a soft sound that said more than words could.
I was wrong to keep you a secret, Ray. All those years I told myself it was for the farm. It was pride.
I figured. But knowing doesn't make 40 years of silence hurt less.
I know, I'm sorry. That word doesn't fix it, but it's all I've got left.
It's something. We're here now. That's more than we had yesterday.
They ate in the easy quiet that followed forks and knives the only conversation.
You should stay the night. There's a spare room. No sense driving back in the dark.
I'll stay. Maybe more than tonight if that's all right.
It's all right. It's past time.
Raymond's laugh broke through, rough and unused, a sound that hadn't lived in this kitchen since their father. They finished their meal with coffee, the pot between them, and for the first time since 1984, the Colton brothers had a future. They carried their coffee mugs out to the porch. The night had turned the pasture ink black, stars scattered like spilled salt. Frank set the old photograph on the railing, the porch light catching the 2 boys leaning together. He sank into the rocker. The wood groaned. Raymond took the chair beside him.
Took too long.
We're here now.
Frank's knuckles rested on the railing, a grown man's bones where a boy's had been. That reply was all he needed. The barn stood black against the scatter of stars, the pasture stretching into the dark like a held breath. A coyote called from the hills, the sound a thin ribbon in the dark. Neither man moved. The silence was full now, not empty. Above them, the night sky wheeled slow, the Milky Way a pale river. The farm held them both, and would tomorrow, and the day after that,